Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 149. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Friday. Steelers Nation, Dave, certainly feels like the first full offseason of the Pittsburgh Steelers and NFL calendar. The good news is that offseason window where there's really not a whole lot going on seems to shrink each year, but as always, we will do our best, and we have some good topics for us to discuss today.
Yeah, and started off kind of reverse today. Got this funny email here from Jeff Kinney talking about Trevor Lawrence and his wife announcing they're expecting their first child after his contract extension. Jeff Kinney writes in, he says he hears the baby will be named Alex.
Yeah, I saw it. As soon as you said Trevor Lawrence, I knew we were going on that one. So thank you, Jeff.
There you go there. So good. That's a good one, Jeff. I saw that yesterday. I saw the announcement, obviously, about Trevor Lawrence on it was all over social media yesterday, and then woke up this morning, got this email from Jeff here. I thought I'd start the show with that. Also, Alex, what are you going to do with your ginormous class action lawsuit settlement from the direct NFL Sunday ticket that you'll get in about 30 years?
Yeah, that's going to be the big news of the day today. The NFL losing the verdict going against the NFL in their Sunday ticket antitrust lawsuit. As you've said, as Andrew Brandt has said, there will be lawyers, there will be appeals, but over $4.7 billion in total damages assessed. So, yeah, like you said, we'll get that check in probably 2050.
Yeah, this is going to be, and we mentioned this to one other emailer we had the other day there, at least speculated, this is going to be caught up in the courts for quite a while. The NFL's already going to appeal this, and there will be lawyers, like we said, and this thing could drag out several more years, before at least, that's my initial read on this. I'm not going to pretend like I know more than what's out there, just as far as some of these, business websites have written about, legal websites and the instant analysis that you get on Twitter and all like that. But it will be interesting to follow along as this thing continues to progress. But once again, I know there were several people thinking, well, what does this do to the cap? This has to mean that the salary cap next year is going to be impacted and all like that. Yeah, I would hold off on going that far. When you have guys like Andrew Brandt and some of these other, business law types that in sports business law types and websites that are chiming in on, it seems like it's going to take a long time for this to work its way through the courts and all.
Yeah, I mean, just to stay on that briefly, putting all the monetary stuff aside, because that gets really into the weeds. If the NFL never gets this ruling overturned on appeal, and again, this thing could take years for all the court systems to be exhausted. But if the verdict in essence stays the same, what happens to the future of Sunday ticket, which is so important for Steelers fans because there are so many all over the country, all over the world that will rely on things like Sunday ticket to watch the out-of-market games. Pittsburgh, I think, is relatively unique in that way. That's why when you go to an away game, there's so many Steelers fans, not because they traveled, but because they were already there and just want to be able to see their team in person. So with this ruling, the NFL, I would assume, will have to rethink and revamp or eliminate Sunday ticket. It couldn't exist in its current form if they've just lost this, almost $5 billion antitrust lawsuit. And so will it be the NFL rolling out a per team package where you can sign up and just watch Steelers games, or will it fall on each individual team and market to, sell their own rights to being able to watch games? So I think the real impact here from a fan standpoint is going to be the future of Sunday ticket and your viewing experience and how that's going to change, and potentially for the better, potentially for the worse, that it really could go either way.
Yeah, I read that a little bit of something about how that maybe this could result in individual teams selling their own packages, and however that looks like to the highest bidder or whatnot. And I don't know how it's going to play out. I know there's a lot of people listening, and a lot of out of market people that do. I think one of the drawbacks with the with YouTube now having the NFL Sunday Ticket and all is that they don't have the individual team packages and all like that. And there's fans of individual NFL teams that are not interested in having access to every NFL game, right?
Sure.
They would much rather just be able to watch their team and get on with the rest of their Sunday, that kind of thing. Now, me, on the other hand, give it all to me, but I understand that, not a lot of people are in that situation like that. So I do think that, Sunday Ticket in its current form, at least until this thing works its way through the rest of the legal system, should give fans the ability out of market to just watch their team and their team only.
Right. But that's not going to happen until all these things are resolved. And I imagine Sunday Ticket will still exist in its current form until all these things are resolved. There was that big, just last year, they had that agreement with Google and YouTube. So I don't think it's going to go away tomorrow or this year, or probably not next year, but down the road, how does it, your proof of that, Dave, your experience, how does that change potentially if Sunday Ticket no longer becomes an option? So interesting to watch. To me, that is the most notable impact of this ruling. The money is huge, obviously, and there could be eventually payouts to people that bought Sunday Ticket. But in terms of where the NFL goes from a viewing experience standpoint, that's going to be the long-term effect that fans will feel.
And real quick to kind of top this off, you look at all these streaming services now, to watch every Steelers game out of market, this upcoming season. Think of all the platforms that you'd have to have. And I do have, Sunday Ticket, and you got the Christmas game on Netflix, and probably going to be, is there going to be an Amazon Prime one, right?
The Thursday games. Yeah,
right,
they have
right.
all the Thursday games.
Right. So, Lord knows if you get into later where you have to have the Peacock, the game on Peacock and all like that. So, that definitely adds up for your average NFL fan. I went to that Pirates game in Denver there a couple weeks ago, and we wanted we got the tickets extremely late because we didn't know if we're going to make the game or not. But even so, I think we got kind of lower level along the third base side there, real good viewing seats. I think paid something like, I don't know, 90 something bucks a ticket or something like that. So I was into it, $180, I think, roughly, plus taxes right there. And, before we even sat down, I think we had $50 in food and then, obviously snacks and whatever food and additional drinks, the rest of the game. I probably dropped damn near $400 in that stadium for that game. It just amazes me. And I'm not a big fan of in-game, live experiences. I don't like large crowds and all like that. So that was kind of a one-off for me. But imagine, people that go to these games every week, and even if they have season tickets and the cost involved and all that,
Yeah, it's
parking
difficult.
and whatever, all the things that go along with it.
Sure. So that is the ruling. The initial verdict, again, it'll be on appeal. The NFL's already come out and said they will be appealing it, and it'll still be in the courts for quite some time. But it is extremely rare for the NFL to go to trial, period. And you had Roger Goodell and Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones and other executives in and around the league testify, which almost never happens in that true courtroom setting. And for the NFL to lose this case is also very rare. So it is a historic moment, certainly for football in the NFL and the future of watching the game that occurred yesterday.
All right. I'm sure people have had their fill of us talking about that at this point, but it's notable news in the NFL right now. So we thought we'd hit it and get it out of the way at the top.
Dave, we mentioned this midway through the podcast on Tuesday. When I mentioned it again, we'll talk about it throughout the next couple of weeks and months here, but just want to plug again, Scott Brown, He's done a great job, editor for the site for a long time, such a valuable resource, usually working behind the scenes. He's got a great article coming out, though, on Saturday about Brett Kiesel and Dick LeBeau, and it all kind of comes from the new book that's coming out here, Dick LeBeau Legendary, that focuses on the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Dick LeBeau's, of course, historic Hall of Fame career. The Kiesel story is one that did not make the book that Scott really was, anxious about and thinks it's a great story overall. And so we're going to have that one kind of exclusively for the site. So just want you guys to be aware of that's out there. The legendary book of, by Dick LeBeau. The forwards are written by Troy Polamalu, by James Harrison. And you guys can use the code STEEL30 to get 30% off of the book that's available for pre-sale right now. So just want to plug that again. We'll continue to talk about it here on the show. Hopefully get an interview at some point here with Coach LeBeau, but just want to talk about that because it's a really cool thing that Scott's been able to do. It's been a long time coming, and we're so excited for the book to finally come out here pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We've known about this for a while now, and Scott obviously has been an editor on the site now, and if the name Scott Brown sounds familiar to several of you, it should, because he was obviously a longtime beat writer for the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. I think from there he actually spent a year, 2 years at ESPN as I think he was just a specific Steelers beat writer, even for ESPN several years ago as well, too. And he kind of got out of the rat race, if you will, when it came to sports journalism for several years. He's written a few books along the way here. This is his latest one. And to make it easy, just go to triumphbooks.com/legendary. That's TRIUMPH books.com/legendary. And they've set up a special code for our listeners to get 30% off the purchase. And as Alex said, just enter in STEEL30 at checkout, and you can get 30% off the book. And, even if you're just buying right now ahead of Christmas time or just need a summer read or whatnot, I think this will hit the mark for everybody who buys it.
Yeah, agreed, Dave. And so we'll be talking about that more with more information. And be sure to check out that article Saturday about Brett Kiesel and his just legendary conversation, to use the title here, conversation that he had with Coach Dick LeBeau whenever he was a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, Dave, let's transition now. Again, no major Steelers news that's occurred since Tuesday. One interesting tidbit has been Russell Wilson in his offseason. He's been training out west at UCLA. He's back in the boxing ring doing some sparring. I think actually he was working with Manny Pacquiao's trainer. He'd done that before and then stopped during COVID, has gotten back in the boxing ring. My takeaway from that is that dude looks jacked. That dude looks in such great shape right now for his age. And so he's obviously been hard at work.
I'm sure you got abs that look like that, right? You're always
identical,
always on the treadmill and all like that.
That's how you get abs, is the treadmill. Yes.
I'm over 50. I have the dad body now, even though I'm not a dad. I'm a puppy. I'm a dog dad. I have a dog dad body at this point here. But look, and obviously, I'm sure everybody handled the news responsibly about him getting some on-field work with DK Metcalf and all like that. We've obviously talked about DK Metcalf early in the offseason, had a few beat writers on, and everybody's convinced that DK Metcalf is staying put in Seattle, and that makes sense at this point. Even so, it is fun to think about what if something wound up happening that DK Metcalf landed in Pittsburgh later this summer. I've given up on that hope for quite a while now, but it would not hurt my feelings if something like that came to fruition. Look, just big picture with Russell Wilson on this all off season. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I think on this podcast, and have mentioned it maybe a time or two in some posts as well too. I get some people just, thinking he's, I think people have kind of labeled him as a little bit corny or whatnot. I mean, I guess I get that to some degree, but I think just big picture and looking from the moment that he decided to sign with this team moving forward here, I mean, I think he's done everything and more that you would ask a player, veteran quarterback coming into a new organization. He's done everything that you would want a player like that to do, as far as trying to fit in with the local community and fit in with the team and fit in with the team culture and everything along those lines. So how does this end up turning out for him on the field? We'll obviously see, but I think everything leading up until this point, I think if you look at it objectively, I don't think you can have an issue with all of his actions so far.
Sure, not at all. But again, as you said, all these things will be judged by what happens on the field this fall, starting September 8th. Did the videos of him working out with Metcalf give you any sort of hope? Since I know you had talked about, a couple months ago about potentially something there with DK. I know that people like Greg Bell, other Seahawks beat writers shot the notion down. Did that give you any hopium that maybe something could happen?
No, it didn't. It didn't move the needle any way in that direction. I think this is just him, making the rounds and getting the work in where he can get the work in, and obviously him and DK Metcalf have a relationship, and anytime those two probably do get in the same area, they probably throw the whole football around. So, no, it did not move the needle as far as me thinking anything gets done there, but I will say this. I mean, obviously from a cash cap and where it makes sense position, it could work on the Steelers' end if something got done. But I just don't have a sense that Seattle's wanting to move on from them.
Sure, I don't either. And I knew that thought would come up, although it was talked about less than what I thought it would be. I thought people would go crazy about it because anytime Brandon Ayuk tweets or post something on Instagram, people lose their minds. I thought Wilson on the field with DK would create its own storyline. It didn't really seem to, which I'm thankful for overall. My understanding is these two, and of course, as you said, they were teammates in Seattle for several seasons. They've worked out every year. It's a tradition for those guys to get on the field. Probably happened last year, probably happened his first year in Denver. So this is really nothing new. It's happened every year, according to what I've been able to gather. So non-story from the standpoint of, could DK come to Pittsburgh, but to the larger point, to see Wilson continue to get work in. And yes, he's worked with Steelers receivers, and don't freak out. He worked with them earlier this year in San Diego. So I'm sure they'll probably get together again at some point before training camp. If not, then of course they've been working throughout OTA. So not a big deal overall, but storyline nonetheless.
Oh, Mark Sheriff, obviously former Broncos, offensive lineman, has his own podcast and all that. The Stinking Truth, I think he calls it. Boy, he takes every opportunity to kind of take a shot at Russell Wilson, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's just kind of a broken record. I mean, he's talked about his toxic positivity and that, he's kind of surrounded himself with yes man. He didn't say that exactly, but that's the implication. He did say toxic positivity as a direct verbatim quote. I know his big thing is about Wilson taking too many sacks, and I get that, and I agree with that. And that's one thing you and I have talked about getting his snap to throw times down. That was the third, highest in the NFL last year, and one of the only guys above him was Justin Fields. And so, can you get Wilson to play a bit more rhythmically? I do think a stronger run game, hopefully a better offensive line, will help Wilson. I think maybe a little less traditional offense of the straight dropbacks and more boots and rollouts will help facilitate getting him on the move, changing his launch point, some quicker reads, some half-field reads, some boots where the ball is going to get out quickly. So, putting aside kind of all the weird comments about the toxic positivity, which is just kind of, I think, a little too much of a dig, but to the idea of Wilson taking too many sacks, that is valid. The question is, can Pittsburgh be able to reduce that number? I think they can, although Wilson will still occasionally frustrate you with that runaround play that probably results in a negative outcome.
I agree, and we've hit on quite a bit of that aspect of his play. Obviously, since he's been signed, I'd rather have a guy with toxic positivity than toxic negativity, right?
Yeah, no, amen to that. So, yeah, I'll put all those comments aside, but that has certainly been the hill that Mark Schlereth has been able and willing to die on consistently in his commentary throughout the offseason. All right, Dave, again, pretty slow day today. I wrote something yesterday just trying to, think about the season and what my expectations are and what goals and kind of some metrics that I want to follow throughout the year to kind of gauge how well the season is going. And had an article, 3 stats that must change for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2024. Some of them obvious, some of them a little bit less so. Obviously, off the top here and beyond scoring more points to pull them at Matt Canada, They, of course, have to do that, but need more passing touchdowns. Just 13 in 2023. Only the Jets had fewer last year. Over the last 2 years, Pittsburgh has 25 total touchdown passes. That is the lowest mark in the NFL. In this modern era, it is simply just hard to win, at least in the postseason, when you're a team that's averaging less than one touchdown pass per game. I know Pittsburgh will run the ball. They're going to be run heavy, hopefully finish a bunch of drives off with rushing touchdowns, but got to get to at least 20 touchdowns through the air, which still seems like such a low and easily attainable bar. New quarterback room should hopefully facilitate that, but got to just join 2024 in the modern era day with, a respectable number of passing touchdowns.
I agree, and I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that the Steelers will have more than 13 in 2024. They better, and I think it's right for you. Look, I mean, they obviously did fairly decent on the ground. In fact, obviously most of their low red zone touchdowns came on the ground last year. But there are going to be situations where you've got to throw the football into the end zone, and especially within the 20-yard line. I think Russell Wilson, just looking back at his touchdowns alone, I thought he did a good job from that aspect of it. So, yeah, I'd like to see that number, obviously 20 or definitely higher. And, I think Russell Wilson gives him the ability to improve that number drastically.
I know sometimes fixating on one number can be a little pointless, but is there a number of touchdowns through the air you want to see this team hit? Is it 17 to at least get you to one per game? Is it 20? Is it 25? Is there a number that you would set as a goal for this team?
Oh, boy, you'd have to go look back at historically, have there been any teams that have, made deep runs into the playoffs with X, below X amount of red zone passing touchdowns? I guess that'd be something maybe interesting to go down the rabbit hole on. I don't know. Just off the top of my head, I think combined, you'd like to see your quarterbacks at least throw 25 red zone touchdowns would be the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think 20 at minimum. And that would assume that your run game produces probably a bunch of rushing touchdowns that just takes away some opportunities through the air. But I think 25 I would love. And that's kind of poetic because that's the number of touchdowns they've thrown the last 2 years, 25, 13, and 2023, 12 the year prior. And so to do that in one season, I think would be a nice way to put a bow on good production for this passing game.
Absolutely. All right, next stat.
First quarter scoring, and Dave, we've talked about it for years, even in kind of better offensive years overall, about the slow starts Pittsburgh gets off to. And last year, Pittsburgh had, including the playoffs, 54 first quarter offensive points. They were outscored 84-61 in the first quarter. That includes Alex Highsmith's pick 6 in week 2. From an offensive standpoint, outscored 84-54. That minus 30 margin, not acceptable. Pittsburgh did get better later in the year, post Matt Canada firing, with Mason Rudolph in a quarterback. Again, new quarterback changes can hopefully alleviate that, but have to get off the better start. Just simply not enough first quarter scoring.
Yeah, like Matt Canada used to say, got to score more points, but not only that, you got to score more points in the first. It would be nice to not have some sort of streak where, we're in week 5 and we're talking about, they don't have, specifically like an opening drive touchdown. Obviously you're not going to have 17 of those in a season. Boy, it sure would be nice to have about 4 of them, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, and that just speaks to opening script and game planning. And Pittsburgh has always seemed to be behind the 8 ball. I think they're a team that's able to adjust mid-game relatively well. But in terms of opening script, it feels like they're always a step behind, at least offensively.
Right. So, I agree. We need to see this team get off to better starts, not only overall and moving the football, but putting the football in the end zone the first quarter as well, too, and not selling for those for field goals, if you can help it.
And then finally, the third stat, flipping over to the defense, because they can't be absolved entirely either. The explosive plays that were allowed, 72 of 20-plus yards from scrimmage last year, passing or rushing, most of them passing, but 72 explosive plays was tied for 26th in the NFL on the wrong end of that equation. So I know the injuries played a factor, severely last year at inside linebacker, at safety. So hopefully a healthy defense just alone will mitigate and reduce that number. But regardless, a number to watch for, because there was a time, again, probably more early in the season than later, but a time where Pittsburgh was allowing too many chunk plays.
Yeah, and you look back at last year, and you mentioned this in the post. Having a healthy Minka Fitzpatrick back, and he was one of the names I just highlighted in the 90 of 30 series post that went up this morning there, and missed a chunk of game with a hamstring, and then it was a knee later in the season. Mm-hmm. Just having him back on the field, if you can keep him on the field for 17 games, that should help dramatically in that category, along with the fact that they seem cognizant of the fact that they want to keep him more in the deeper portions of the field and let him play Minka ball. And I think if you're able to do that, you got Joey Porter Jr. in his second year now. You expect to make some strides in that area. Keep your edge rushers on the field. Keep Cam Hayward on the field. You got a rebuilt inside linebacker room at this point as well too. You start adding all those little things together, and you would certainly hope that you are able to drastically cut. Because look, as many advanced analytic stats that we get, and I love them all. Send me more. You can't get away from some of these core stats like explosive plays, right? Explosive plays win and lose ball games, and if you can limit your opposition to lessen the number of explosive plays, and on the flip side, create more explosive plays on the offensive side of football, you start getting into the whole TOC stat, turnovers and explosive plays, and how important that is in the grand scheme of things. We try to make this game complicated at times by analyzing and overanalyzing, and I have my hand up at that. I get guilty of that as well. But I think if you boil this thing down sometimes to just simplicity of explosive plays, turnovers, adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat, those three key areas, if you can make strides in those areas, you should win more ball games.
Yeah, so that's the game plan and 3 stats I'll be watching for closely throughout this team's 2024 season and hoping for improvement.
You could have very easily added a 4th stat to that to please the boss and
adjusted net yards per passing attempt.
Yeah, adjusted net yards per passing attempt on the offensive side there. Boy, that's been dismal here. And you obviously would like to see Russell Wilson get that number, as a team. At a bare minimum, 6.5 looks like a Ritz cracker right now compared to what this team has done. But if he and obviously touchdown passes plays into that, which plays into the stat that you highlighted at the top of this thing. Red zone touchdown passes and all like that. So, man, you want to add that stat into the 3 that you named there, if they can make strides in all 4 of those areas, they're going to win more ball games.
Sure, it's all intertwined. The more touchdowns you throw, the more likely your adjusted net yards per passing attempt is higher. The more likely you're scoring, in the first quarter. So they all work hand in hand. But those are the core things, and certainly those stats will be things I'll be watching for very closely throughout the season. All right, Dave, where to from here? I think you had some questions for me about the 2025 cash spending. So I'm not sure where you're going with this. So take it away.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about this aspect of it, but I'm going to have a post coming up on this kind of because we talked quite a bit about the 2024 cash spending so far this season. And in fact, I wrote a post about a week ago talking about how I specifically expect this team to spend maybe at least 20 more million in cash between now and week 1 of the start of the season. I'm not one at this time of the year to go deep into 2025, the next season financials and cap situation, because there's still a lot that's going to play out. Heck, I start normally getting into that stuff after week 1, after the roster's set, after we know how many players are under contract for the next season, start looking at the cap situation that way. But I did kind of peek I couldn't help it, guys. I went down a rabbit hole Because I wanted to kind of get an idea of what the early estimations might be for a cap number in 2025, and then from there I wanted to look at what the cash situation is for the team right now as it stands right now, and kind of project out a rough kind of 53, because obviously right now, look, I think they have 39 players under contract for 2025. And obviously not all 39 of those players are going to be under contract, because you got rookies, you got undrafted free agents in there. You got some players that might have their contracts terminated. So what I did is using a conservative estimation for a cap increase for 2025, I've got that number coming in at about $272 million as a league-wide, maybe low-end 2025, cap estimation number. I went through and looked at the cash expenditure for the 38 players currently under contract for 2025, and 39 players. And then what I did is I added placeholders to work it out to 53 players overall, and I gave those additional players second year salaries to help kind of absorb like draft pick contracts and what the cash would be involved in those, and any futures contracts and all like that. What I wanted to do is kind of get myself kind of a working estimated 2025 cash number here, and I've got that come out about 147.5 million or thereabouts there. Now there's a method to my madness here overall, and the fact is that to leave out specifics and leave out boring people to death here, I've kind of got this team looking at a cash percentage versus cap expenditure rate in 2025 around 91-92%. Long story short, at least from where we sit right now, it looks like this team's going to have to at least find a way to spend another $100 million in cash somehow.
You go Dr. Evil on me there?
Huh?
You go Dr. Evil on me? $100 million.
$100 million. But long story short, it looks like they're going to have to try to find a way to get $100 million in additional cash spent, at least from where we sit right now, on the books. And where am I going with that? Well, $100 million is especially when it comes to the Steelers, additional spending is a daunting number. Okay. The method to the madness here is to kind of go back and kind of reinforce, because we still have 2024 cash spending that we think is going to happen. And a byproduct of that 2024 cash spending would be to put more cash spending on the books for 2025. For example, if this team goes out and signs Pat Freiermuth to an extension this offseason, not only are you going to have a huge cash spending this summer, you're going to put in a base salary of, let's say, I don't know, $13 million for Pat Freiermuth in 2025. So that would be an additional $13 million, for example, going on the books next season. What's going to happen with Cam Hayward, regardless of what they do of new money in 2024, he's probably going to have a base salary of, I don't know, 15, 16 million or so in 2025. So that's another cash expenditure there. Let's just assume that you add up that they get Freiermuth and Cam Hayward done in extensions. Mm-hmm. But let's say that totals up to an additional $30 million in base salaries that go on the books for 2025. So at least we've eaten into that 100 million number right there, but that still leaves another 70 million. And like it or not, 70 million cash spend trying to project that out, even if they have a somewhat busy unrestricted free agency. next off season. They really have to go hog wild to eat into that. It leads me back to kind of, is this maybe some sort of hint that might result in a Najee Harris extension this offseason? Because you could put in technically another 10 or 11 million dollars on the books as far as a base salary goes for or at minimum $9 million on the books for 2025 as a byproduct of, let's say, a 2-year $20 million extension for Najee Harris this summer here. So just playing around with and look, this is all loose. These are, a lot of this is going to change, and it's real. I did it for me. I didn't do it for the listeners. I didn't do it for you. I didn't do it for the readers. I did it for me as kind of a snapshot at this point of the offseason to be able to look back at, especially after the 2024 season. But I couldn't help but come away from these loose numbers that I've cobbled together here with kind of wondering how much more spending is going to happen this offseason in cash. Now, look, obviously, if they go out and get a big name wide receiver, a significant wide receiver, that will move the needle in several areas, right? Sure. Cash this year, cash next year, whatever that base salary would be, yada yada. But obviously, at this point, not a lot of people are probably optimistic about a Ayuk, a Deebo Samuel, a DK Metcalf, or a Cortland Sutton coming to town this summer. But and if that did not happen, it does make you wonder how many extensions will we indeed see moving throughout the rest of this summer. We talked about the James Daniels. It doesn't, even James Daniels does not think James Daniels is going to get a contract extension. I think most people, you and me and several others, are fairly confident that we'll see something done with Pat Freiermuth. So I think I'll be surprised if something doesn't happen there. Most people are probably pretty optimistic about a Cam Hayward extension, whatever that looks like. In the end here, though, I wonder if we might not see one or two more extensions here this summer of players not named Pat Freiermuth, not named Cam Hayward, just based on the loose assumption that this team's got to put cash spending on the books for 2025.
My takeaway from all that, and I've mentioned this before, is that next year is going to be really active, especially potentially keeping and retaining their own. I think in terms of understanding they're going to have to spend a lot of cash. I don't know if I would put it towards any one player. I don't know if I'd sit there and say it makes it more likely that Najee will get an extension. What I think it just says is that just overall they're going to be spending more and working to retain some of their pending free agents, which of course could include Najee. But I think where I start is with quarterback, which is the obvious elephant in the room. What happens to Russell Wilson, Justin Fields? I mean, if one of them plays well this year and Pittsburgh is considering, a multi-year extension with Wilson or Fields, we're talking significant money. The way the quarterback market has, of course, gone up and up, and we're talking, $55 million is the top end of the market. What does an extension with, let's assume for a second it is Wilson, since he's going to be the likely week one starter, and assume he has a good year. What does an extension look like? We're talking at least $35 million per year, and probably more depending on the season he had.
Sure, and you're going to have a huge signing bonus as part of that, so you could dump a lot of cash with a signing such as that. Absolutely,
right. But that's a chunk.
And that's a big part of the unknown and the dangerous part of going into cash spending a year out when you don't even you're still 4 weeks away from the start of this year's training camp. And another fly in the ointment as well, too. I mean, TJ Watt, what's going to happen with TJ Watt next offseason? He'll be entering the final year of his contract. And that could end up being a huge cash spend next offseason. On the flip side, though, several players that are under contract right now that are factoring into that 2025 cash spend. You've got currently in 2025, you've got a cash spend lined up for $7 million on Larry Ogunjobi.
Sure.
Is Larry Ogunjobi going to be on this roster after all the dust settles next offseason? What about a guy like Cole Holcomb? That's $6 million Cole Holcomb is on the books for 2025 as far as the cash spend goes. Can you guarantee us right now that Cole Holcomb is going to be on the week 1 2025 roster? I don't think anybody really can at this point. What's going to happen with Cordero Patterson after one season? $2.8 million there. Now you start fanning out from there. You got a lot of lower salaries, a lot of it doesn't really matter type situations there. But I think so. I think you're right in identifying. Yeah, you're asking me, I'm paraphrasing here. I'm asking you, does all this correlate to an extra extension for players not named Cam Hayward or Pat Freiermuth? There are a lot of variables involved. You got the whole quarterback situation that nobody can predict that right now. Might you get in a position where you're dropping $35 million in cash and a signing bonus and base salary on a quarterback next offseason? I mean, that's a significant chunk of change. TJ Watt, what's going to happen there? Significant drop in the bucket as far as cash goes there. But I still can't help but think that some of this might correlate into an extension for players not named Hayward or Freiermuth this offseason.
And really on that list of the extension candidates, it's Najee, it's Fields, and that's about all we've been able to come up with, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go. I mean, they're not going to do anything with Boswell, right?
I was looking at that, but he's he signed through 2025, I think.
Right. They would essentially have to do so. No, he signed through 2026. So the odds of them doing something there are slim. And look, I realize next offseason you got Jaylen Warren. You're going to have an increase in his salary if he gets a second round tender, and then maybe you do something there. At that point, but even so, probably not going to be a huge cash needle mover overall. But and some of these guys obviously are going to be unrestricted free agents after this season, but this team hasn't been notorious of going hard and heavy after their own as of late, right?
I mean, well, they haven't had a ton to go heavy after. I mean, What did they have? There was no must mandate re-sign of their free agent class, their own guys this past year. It was Mason Rudolph. It was Miles Killebrew. I mean, it was not exactly the star-studded names. You're going to have a lot more name. To me, in terms of where the big cash spending could come next year, it's a couple of buckets, and it's not necessarily on Najee. It's the quarterback situation. I'll put it on Wilson right now. It's extension, new deal for TJ Watt. It's paying a receiver, which either is trading for somebody or paying George Pickens, because if he has a great year, he's going to be coming to Pittsburgh saying, pay me almost $30 million. And so that's going to be a big time money there. And then just a free agent deal. Pittsburgh's shown they're willing to spend like they've never spent before by signing Patrick Queen to a record-setting deal for a Pittsburgh Steelers outside free agent. That probably happens again for some other position, some other name next year. And so you add all those up, that's to me is kind of what the real needle movers will be in terms of how this team spends its cash and cap next year.
But overall, you don't have a lot of real notable guys on this roster right now under contract through only 2024, especially if you eliminate guys like Cameron Hayward and Pat Freiermuth, who we think are going to get extended this offseason and thus not even make it to free agency next year. I mean, you got Russell Wilson, and that's obviously a big name there. But who outside of this unrestricted free agent list is going to be move the needle guys? I mean, you got a Landon Roberts who's already 31, right?
Right. And he's not going to be a big money guy, even if you did something with him on another contract. I mean, as of right now, if you take Harris and Freiermuth and those pending free agents out of the equation, I understand your point. But again, paying a quarterback is going to be so.
Sure.
Pittsburgh has gotten fortunate with spending on the minimum. What does just assume that Wilson has a good year, whatever you consider a good year to be, one where Pittsburgh wants to re-sign him. What does that extension look like in terms of an average yearly value? What do you think the floor is on that?
Well, I mean, you just had Trevor Lawrence signed for $55 million at top of the market. I mean, even if you look at middle of the market right now, look, it'll be a great problem to have if after the season we're talking, man, they got to get Russell Wilson signed to a big deal, right? I mean that's a good problem to have. And if you reach that point, I mean, you got Daniel Jones out there at 40 million right now, right? You got guys like Derek Carr at 37.5 million. Russell Wilson's, if you get to a point where you've got to have a guy like that under a big contract, his number's going to come in higher than those numbers.
So you think like 40 million is probably the floor on a multi-year deal with Wilson next year?
Yeah, I mean, if you're to the point where you got to have this guy. Now, look, I suppose you could get into the realm of, yeah, he's the best. You know, he did okay. We want to see more of. To me, you either go all in or you go all out, right?
Sure. And if you're extending him, he's not doing that for cheap. You're not going to get any sort of discount. This guy's playing for big money. So I'm with you. I agree. I think, I said 35. I think I was being very, very conservative. I think 40 million would be the floor. Again, this all assumes that he has a good year. Let's say he throws 25 plus touchdowns. They go to the playoffs, to win a playoff game. That's what I'm talking about in terms of, what will facilitate and require an extension of that magnitude. But the point is, if you're giving out $40 million, I know in terms of, how you structure, it's going to be different. First year base salary will be, I assume, probably on the lower end, but those things those will be the real drivers of your cash spending next year is the point I'm trying to make. Wilson, Watt, Pickens, free agent.
Right. And look, I mean, a signing bonus on a guy like Russell Wilson on a $40 million per contract would be pretty huge. And that would be considered a 2025 cash spend. But
that's
anyway,
going to be like a third of that number you talked about, the 100.
Right.
What was it, 110, 120?
No, I mean, 100 million, it feels like on the low side right now. But I mean, obviously that's too far out. Once again, I did this for me. I did this for a conversation piece for us to have during this podcast here and all like that. We get to the start of the season, these numbers might be off 25 million either side,
Sure. But I think to the larger point, and the one that I've made is maybe one reason why you've seen Pittsburgh, because we agree as of right now, their cash spending is pretty low this year, 82%. I think that could be, it's for a lot of reasons. If they trade for Ayuk or some other receiver, as you said, it's going to change the situation dramatically, but it also may be anticipating this team's going to spend a ton of cash next year.
Right, but they're not guaranteed to spend a lot of cash on the quarterback situation, though. But at least, but it obviously could factor into this. And if they don't, here's the thing: what if both these guys?
Sure.
What if neither one of them's worth signing to a huge cash spending deal after the season? God forbid.
It's a scary thought. It's a real one, though. It is certainly a real one. Or what if Wilson just starts the whole year and he's just okay, never terrible, where he gets benched, but Fields barely plays? You're not going to obviously pay him a ton of money. It gets into a really interesting situation. Do you kind of take a leap of faith and pay him some other smaller, level contract? But yeah, then Pittsburgh's back to the drawing board. And at that point, I just sit there and say, you got to go draft somebody. I know that's easier said than done, especially if we're Pittsburgh picks in the pecking order draft wise. But at that point, that's your option.
I mean, and who would be the notable free agent quarterbacks next year?
We'll have an endless discussion about Dak Prescott if he does not get a long-term deal or franchise tag by Dallas. So that's already being speculated in the dog days of summer right now, but it'll be talked about full force next year. Yeah,
I kind of got a feeling that they'll get something done with Dak Prescott before week 1, and if they do, then there really are. I mean, who are the notable guys if he gets done?
I can check. I really hadn't given any sort of look outside of that because he has been discussed.
It's not
Jordan Love. Was he on that? He got a 1-year extension, right?
Yeah, but they're probably going to lock him up.
Probably. I'm just talking about just free agents. Who is even listed as a free agent? Yeah, it's Prescott, Love, Sam Darnold with his 1-year deal. He signed in Minnesota as the bridge there with McCarthy. Again, Tua. They probably will re-sign him in Miami, but those are some of the names that are at least free agents as of right now.
All right. Okay. All right. Move us along to the next category.
All right, Dave, I know we're going to go through your 90 and 30 series, and these two names are going to be upcoming names you'll talk about, but you wanted to discuss some of the backup offensive linemen, and I'm all for it. I'm all in on that. Guys that are on the back end of the roster have a real uphill climb to make the team, but guys that are worth talking about and guys that may impress, because Dylan Cook, somebody that, was in that position a year ago, wasn't being talked about by myself or really anybody last summer until training camp started, really the back half of training camp, whenever he really gained momentum and played well and earned a spot on the 53 that surprised, I think, a lot of people. So you want to talk about guys like Anderson Hardy and Devery Hamilton and Joey Fisher, and I'm all in.
Yeah, and specifically, I wanted to cheat today because I'm fixing to have to write today about the next three players on my list, which are Thomas Graham Jr., the defensive back, Devery Hamilton, and Anderson Hardy are the next three on the list. And two of those are offensive linemen. But you know more about, you've written, I think, watched and written about Devery Hamilton and know a little bit more about him. And I just really wanted to kind of focus. We've talked a lot about Dylan Cook and how we're going to be watching him in this tackle battle out throughout training camp. But tell us a little bit more, tell me a little bit more about Devery Hamilton and how he could factor into this thing.
Yeah, he's a guy that was German-born, came to the States in 2007. Let me just kind of read through my notes here. Initially committed to Michigan and then went to Stanford for several seasons. So there's kind of an IQ, high football IQ vibe there, and then transferred to Duke for, I believe, his final season back in 2020. He played tackle and guard in college at Duke and at Stanford, undrafted, signed with the Raiders. He's been a tackle throughout his career. Pittsburgh signed him to a futures contract in January. He had gotten some buzz in the Giants. I think he had a good camp a couple of years ago and was kind of trying to push for a roster spot there. He's worked as a right tackle primarily, some tackle eligible stuff as well. So obviously we're probably talking third string tackle whenever Pittsburgh goes through training camp. They have the first team, second team, third team. Can almost guarantee that Hamilton will be likely third string right tackle. But that is, a guy that's, again, in that Cook position a year ago. It was kind of third string tackle, not being talked about. And, that's a guy that could make a push for the practice squad.
I guess overall, my thoughts are, obviously once we got into training camp and then most definitely the preseason on my end, both of us started saying, hey, this is a guy people need to be on the lookout for here, potentially making a roster. And obviously Dylan Cook ended up doing that. He ended up sticking on the 53-man roster. Is this a guy that we need to be talking about a little earlier instead of later once the preseason gets underway?
I think those things just get revealed over time. I mean, Cook, again, was the guy that really didn't stand out. I think it was the Friday Night Lights practice was the first time I thought, okay, Dylan Cook and some of those 1v1s had some really strong reps. And that's the first time I said, okay, this guy might have something. So we'll watch for it for sure. And he's got some NFL experience. He's not a brand new rookie. And so that's going to help him in a camp. He's got good size overall. The length is average, but 33-inch arms. I mean, that's acceptable at tackle. He's 6'0", 6'5". He tested well at 33.5-inch vertical, 9'4" broad at his pro day. That shows some measure of explosiveness that will be important in this zone-based system Arthur Smith will run. So I don't want to say he's a guy to watch for, but there is something there to talk about with him. And if his play reveals something, worth mentioning more, then certainly we'll be talking about it more come training camp.
What position did he mostly play with the Giants in preseason? Was it the Giants in preseason?
Yeah, he's bounced around. He's been with the Raiders and Giants, but right tackle with the Giants primarily, and also some tackle eligible 6 offensive lineman work.
Okay. I'm trying to pull his snaps up by position from preseason.
He did make the roster in 2022. He had played 39 snaps on offense. He had gotten hurt in 2023. He got waived injured, released with an injury settlement. And then I think he was basically recovering until Pittsburgh signed him in January to a futures contract.
Yeah, that's why I'm not seeing anything snaps on him from last preseason then. But when you look at 2022 preseason, 160 snaps he played during 3 preseason games. at left tackle. And then he also logged an additional 19 snaps at left guard during the 2022 pre 189 snaps for an offensive lineman during the preseason. That's a lot of snaps for an offensive for a backup offensive lineman.
Yeah, there's certainly some experience there. There's no question. Did he not do some right tackle? Because I have my notes here, right tackle. I'm trying to see where I had pulled that from. I just have a mention of him playing right tackle, but you have left tackle snaps with the Giants too.
Last year during the preseason, let's see about right tackle in 2021 preseason in one preseason game, 44 snaps.
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if he can push for that practice squad spot.
All right, and Anderson Hardy, what do you know about the Appalachian State product?
Yeah, I really want to see, will he be working as a tackle or a guard? Really good athlete. If you're into RAS numbers, he had a 9.26 and some of his 40 times and verts and those types of things were really impressive overall. Now he was a tackle at App State. He kicked inside to guard with the Chiefs. He went undrafted in 2023. Pittsburgh had tried Hardy out back in September and then kind of circled back to him with their future contracts after their season ended. So my question initially is, will Hardy be working as a guard or a tackle? And then I'll kind of take things from there.
32-inch arms on him, right?
Yeah, that's probably why he kicked inside to guard, because that lack of length there. He's got the height at 6'5", but the lack of length was probably pushing him inside.
And any deep guard on this roster is going to have more than enough work cut out for them. If there's a path for any of these guys that kind of we're talking about on the back end of the roster, it would potentially be as a third or fourth tackle.
Yeah, I think a backup tackle would have a bit easier path. Now, again, he was left tackle at App State, good athlete overall, and could that, again, play well in this system? I think it's going to require some more athleticism, some more snap and pop and combo blocking and working in space, screen game. If they're going to be, using the screen game more often this year, running back screen game, then you need some linemen who can function in space. So Hardy's a guy that I kind of do have an eye on. Of like, could this guy maybe impress this summer? But you got to get these guys on the field and watch the reps and go from there.
All right, to rewind and to leave it at this point, is Devery Hamilton really the biggest threat to Dylan Cook?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think Cook just has to show that he can carry things over and continue to improve his game. I mean, if Cook has a good camp,
he's staying.
Yeah, it's really hard to see somebody overtaking him. And then you get in the conversation of, do you then consider trading a Dan Moore if you can get something for him, a fifth round value, just spitballing some compensation ideas? That's kind of where it goes. But Cook, I think, again, because he just hasn't played a ton of offensive tackle. 5 years ago, he was playing quarterback at Montana. Was it Montana Northern, I think, before he transferred to Montana State and bulked up and played right tackle. So it's still a pretty new thing for him to do. But the traits, the size, the athleticism, I thought his hand usage was really improved last year. He's got that snatch and trap. The technique, I thought, was looking impressive, but there's still probably some small things he has to work on technically in his game. And can he show something at guard? They moved him to left guard late in the summer last year to kind of see how it looked there after playing both tackle spots. And I thought he held his own in pretty limited reps. So can he really become a versatile guy that can play both tackle spots and at least one guard spot? Exciting guy to watch for, but it is still have to see that continuation of growth and improvement in his, for kind of first full year with Pittsburgh, because he got signed last May.
With all those snaps that Hamilton took in the 22 preseason, I might try to go down that rabbit hole and pull that all 22 tape this weekend here. At the very least, practice squad candidate in Hamilton, right?
Sure, I would say so. I think all those guys can be in that mix. When you have a 16-man practice squad, then you're keeping several linemen. The question is, do you keep them or do you go outside and go sign guys from other teams to get other cuts? That'll happen sometimes where teams will add somebody who got cut, which, speaking of which, Joey Fisher was one of those guys last year that signed the Pittsburgh's practice squad after cutdowns, was not in camp, was in San Francisco. He's a guy, similar story to Hardy, college tackle, kicked inside to guard, he's going to be one of those punishers. He's kind of a Mason McCormick type where it's just kind of old school, rocked up, kick your butt type of thing. He's a small school guy, D2 Shepherd, but that's one of the better D2 schools, PSAC, which is my neck of the woods. And so I'm relatively familiar with the school. They're, I think, relatively new to joining the PSAC, but Fisher's a guy that may not be that incredible athlete, but is certainly going to be, I think, somebody that will look impressive in some 1v1 run blocking situations.
All right, how about we roll through about 6 more of these 90 and 30 guys?
Yeah, where are we picking back up here, right, Jack?
Coletto, right, yeah.
Okay, and Coletto, you talk about some sleepers. I mean, I was asked about Coletto a lot in the offseason, and I thought, Arthur Smith would add kind of a true fullback. They'd go sign somebody. It hasn't happened. I know the guys like Connor Hayward, maybe Michael Pruitt's going to get looks there, but Coletto is kind of your one true fullback right now, and even his story is interesting. He was a do-it-all guy at Oregon State. He played quarterback, he played running back, he played fullback, he played linebacker. He won the Paul Hornig Award for the most versatile player, which there's a ton of big names that have won that over the years. So that's a guy that, can he lead block is going to be the question, but I think he's going to be athletic, he can be versatile. It's a name to watch.
Yeah, can he play on some special teams units as well, too? That'll be a big part of his offseason if he can get himself wedged in that, show that he can actually play fullback. And if they're going to, we'll find out if they're going to actually use a fullback or not. He is a guy that very well could turn around and find himself on the 53-man roster when the smoke clears, right?
There's potential. I don't want to discount that. I remember, years ago, even though he had a good camp, I was like, can they make it work with Rosie Nix? And Nix was a guy that compelled Pittsburgh to, for a time, carry 2 fullbacks. It was him and Will Johnson initially. And Nix made it through special teams, blocked that punt against Carolina in the preseason finale and kind of cemented his roster spot there. But he had a good camp throughout. And so can Coletto find a similar path? Again, I wonder what the lead blocking looks like. Nix was a really good lead blocker, the linebacker mentality that he had. Of course, Coletto played the position too, but typically in Arthur Smith's system, the fullback has been a true fullback. They had Keith Smith last year in Atlanta. He was not the H back that was kind of this hybrid type. They had some smaller tight ends, Johnny Smith, that would do that. It was kind of a true and blue lead power blocker, and I want to see if Coletto can be that guy.
All right, Dylan Cook's the next one on the list. We've talked a lot about him the last several weeks and all. The biggest thing with Dylan Cook, I think, is can he build on what he put on tape during the 2023 preseason? Because obviously he didn't play any snaps, even though he made the roster last year. I think he dressed for just one game. What was that? The game that I think Dan Moore missed with his injury there.
Baltimore game, right?
Yeah, Drest did not play, but we saw a guy that really stuck out, especially with a little bit of position flexibility. He could play guard in a pinch. That will probably help his cause a little bit this summer. The biggest thing is we just got to be able to see him stick out. You have to see him stick out during so as best he can in these training camp practices, and once we get into the preseason games, he needs to build on what he put on tape last year, and if he can do that, he's going to be on this roster again.
Yeah, I agree. Technically, some of the things I should go back and rewatch his tape from the preseason and kind of really dig into that more, since I'm so far removed from remembering and watching that. But I'm sure working independent hands in pass protection, working on his strike, his placement of his punch, staying low. He's a bigger guy, and so just trying to keep his pad level down as a blocker is probably going to be important to him. But yeah, I talked about him just a moment ago, just growing as a young guy that's still, again, pretty new to the position. So it's all the things that come along with that.
All right, Jacob Copeland, who just got signed back again to the offseason roster here just recently, is the next guy on this list. Obviously, even the way the wide receiver depth chart looks right now at the bottom of it, a lot of things would have to happen, not good things, in my opinion, for Jacob Copeland to crack the 53-man roster. I think first and foremost, he just got to find a way to keep himself on this offseason roster and make it through the preseason. I think doing that in and of itself would be a huge accomplishment from Jacob for Jacob Copeland. You probably see him get a little bit of burn during the preseason there. Can he show anything on special teams? All that said, this is a guy that even if he stays on the roster throughout training camp and preseason, sounds like at best will be a practice squad candidate.
Yeah, it's going to be obviously a tough path for Copeland and guys in his shoes. I mean, he has been with a team on and off. I guess his third stint with Pittsburgh after being kind of bouncing around the practice squad last year. So at least he's semi-familiar with the organization, although it's has its newness with a new receivers coach and Zach Ghazzani, a new OC and Arthur Smith. And so that's all going to be brand new to him this time around. But can you show something on special teams? Can you be detailed? But as you said, Dave, just kind of like surviving and just, as I think you mentioned last podcast, like hoping other guys stay healthy and so you don't get cut as just part of right. the numbers crunch of it all is kind of going to be like his first mission.
Right. It's weird how sometimes other lines guys going down can impact your roster spot because, if you're at the tail end of another line and an offensive lineman goes down and not one that you part ways with for whatever reason, and you have to bring in another one to help those lines out. It could cost a guy, say at the back end of the wide receiver lines, his roster spot there. So a little bit of a luck factor involved with these back of the line kind of guys as well too. All right, James Daniels, next one on the list, obviously going to be on the roster, should be on the roster this year, should be the starting right guard as we sit here right now today. A guy that's not expected to get a contract extension this offseason here. Big season for him. Obviously he had kind of that groin issue last year. Makes you kind of wonder, even though he was able to kind of work through that, how much that groin injury maybe impacted his overall play last season here. I think he's got look, if he's going to be on this team, I just want to see. I thought overall in pass protection he was okay. I just want to see more out of him in the run game, in the run blocking department.
Yeah, I mean, I like his fit, and again, I know Arthur Smith will have a varied run scheme. It's not going to be exclusively wide zone. We talked about that a lot right after the hire back in early February. But he's athletic to work in this zone system, so I think he fits. But he is not that road grader mauler in the run game. I'll grant you that.
I just think we just have got to see significant or, somewhat significant gains by him in the run blocking department. If he doesn't get this contract, it's a big season for him, right? We talk about the guard tax and all like that. I mean, he's still got youth on his side. I mean, if he puts together a good, matches his best season to date, whatever that looks like, or even improves on it. I mean, this is a guy that could cash in big time in free agency next offseason. So there's a lot of incentive for James Daniels in 2024.
No question. If he has a good year, we're looking at a payday. That's Kevin Dotson, Robert Hunt. Who are the other guards that got paid this offseason? I know I always think about Dotson and Hunt because they were the Louisiana Lafayette teammates, and of course Dotson being in Pittsburgh, but there were other guards that were getting some good money this year, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, there were a few of them, right? What was it? Did Jonah Jackson sign a new deal? Wasn't he one of them?
I think you're right about that. Yeah, I believe so. It was Corbett last year. I think Austin Corbett was last year, not this year.
Landon Dickerson, didn't he get a nice payday?
Did he? I'm not remembering that. He was the 21 class. I guess he could get an extension. Did he get extended?
I think he did. I think he
oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Good call. I completely had forgotten about that. 4 years worth up to $87 million.
And didn't even John Runyon Jr. Didn't he get a pretty decent?
I think you're right. He signed somewhere. Yeah. Where did he sign? The Giants? Yeah, he signed with the Giants. 3 years, $30 million. But even for him, where his status being a late round pick, I mean, that's still really good. Can I interrupt our 90 and 30 with some nonsense that may get talked about today, which is it's just nonsense and it's just fodder. But Brandon Ayuk went live on IG during our podcast here. I'm just looking at a tweet here. He had a video. I don't think he said anything, but he's wearing a Pirates hat. And so people are going to start probably lose their minds about what does it mean about Brandon Ayuk wearing a Pirates hat?
Okay.
Yeah. Good just a heads up there. That's probably going to be. It shouldn't be a story because again, I'm just waiting for something to happen, and I think he's trolling half the time too. Because he even said that when he did the whole like Tomlin, aren't we twins? I think he said later like I'm just trying to have some fun and just trying to mess with people. So this is all calculated.
Yeah, I think I think he's trying to make some waves there.
Yeah. All right, anyway, I'm sorry. We'll get back to anything else on James Daniels.
No, I think we got Dejon Edwards, the running back, undrafted free agent out of Georgia, is the next one on the list. A little bit undersized, but I think what stuck out to me with his film was some of that cutting of his. I think he measures in 5'9" and 5'8", 207 pounds. I thought for a guy of his stature, I thought he represented himself fairly well in the pass blocking department there. And we talked recently about him kind of going back and remembering Jaylen Warren a couple of years ago as an undrafted free agent. I think so. I understand the classification of Cordell Patterson and yada yada, but make no mistake about it, Cordell Patterson can still be used in the backfield as a pinch, and has plenty of carries back there. Should this team somehow get in a pinch with that, I just think Edwards, at least, and it's not it's a Captain Obvious thing. I think he's got some ability there. I think he's going to be a fun guy to watch this offseason. I think he's a guy that if he stays healthy, get into the preseason, is going to get a little bit of work to show some things there. But I think realistically, we're looking at a guy battling for a practice squad spot here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to write about him. And my working title in my head was Daewon Edwards, poor man's Jaylen Warren with a poor man's spot to the roster. I think that path to make the 53 is probably a bit tougher than what Warren had to face beating out McFarland his rookie year when he had Patterson as at number 3. And I wouldn't call Edwards all the way to Warren. And the big difference between the two is he might lack a little bit of the power, but he lacks a lot of the explosiveness. He's not nearly as bursty with the acceleration as Warren is, but he's a tough customer. He's stout. He's short. He's not small, but he's stout with a low center of gravity. I wrote in my report on him, annoyingly hard to tackle, which is guys just took 3-4 guys to bring him down. He just kept on trucking. The power is not necessarily like going to run through you, but he's going to be able to fall forward. And he's got some really impressive lateral quickness. That was probably the top trait for me, was some of the real short space change of direction type stuff, the stop start ability, the jump cuts. That was really off the charts. His pass protection looked good too. He's willing, and he's got a pretty good resume as a coverage guy too. He was the coverage guy his first 3 years at Georgia before becoming kind of the full-time running back his last year and leading the Bulldogs in rushing. So I certainly see practice squad potential with him. It's harder to see that 53 spot, but we said the same about Warren, I'm sure, back his rookie year. And so that's a guy that I think we'll be talking about Edwards having a couple of impressive runs and run periods during camp.
All right, last name on the list here for today for the 90 and 30 series, Deshaun Elliott, obviously the new safety on the Steelers, signed a 2-year, $6 million free agent contract back in March, comes to the Steelers after playing 2023 season with the Dolphins, obviously former Baltimore Ravens 6th-round draft pick. He's logged, some snaps in the NFL. He is the guy that we expect to be the complement to Minkah Fitzpatrick, play a lot in the box. He's got some pretty decent tape overall and look, he's a versatile guy as well, too. He's been asked to play a lot of free safety so far. Last season with the Dolphins, in fact, he mostly played free safety and also logged over 100 snaps as a slot defender there. So this is a guy that it feels like predominantly going to be more inside the box, especially when you have one high safety looks here. And, just looking for Elliott in 2024 to become, their next big time box safety.
Yeah, I think it was a shrewd signing by Pittsburgh. I'm not going to pretend like Elliott is really anything more than an average NFL safety, but I think it's a good compliment as a defined, strong safety that can play in the box, that can stuff the run, and can allow Minkah Fitzpatrick to be Minkah, as you said earlier, Minkah ball to be free safety and not have to play as close to the line as consistently, because last year he was over 20% box rate compared to 2 years ago when it was like 8%. And you want to let Minkah be Minkah. So the best thing about Elliott is that it'll allow Minkah Fitzpatrick to play at his best. So that's what I'm most excited about.
And the fact that he at least has some free safety ability gives you, the ability to rotate some stuff and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not going to be foreign to him if he's going to play the post safety, if Minkah's going to come down and rob. So that's a benefit as well. And he knows AFC North ball, so it's nothing new to him as well.
All right, that's the 6 I think that we covered from the 90 and 30 series today, Alex.
All right, good deal. We'll cover 6 more on Tuesday's show. Dave, anything else? If not, we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, one from Bryce here. He says, I love the confidence coming from Joey Porter Jr., but he needs to be careful. Ike Taylor also had a solid rookie outing, but followed it with a terrible sophomore season where he was benched. Joey better be gearing up to raise his game to another level because these NFL coaches watched that film from last year and will be much more prepared for him this upcoming season. He says, right now, the Steelers have the best guard tandem in the AFC North. The thing, look, it just here's the long and short of Joey Porter Jr. You expect that next year jump.
You do, but I also want to, make it clear that he's going to take his lumps too. When you're facing the top receiver as consistently as he is likely to face them, you're going to lose some battles. It's 2024. Teams can throw the ball at will. The rules go in offense's favor. Porter can be a little grabby, so. It's not all going to be perfect, but I'm really excited about him overall. And I understand there's a line of confidence, but I mean, you got to be confident as a corner. I mean, Ike Taylor was supremely confident. Even in your worst moments, you have to be confident because it's such a mental position and you will be tested. So I get the point there. There will be some negative moments, but overall, I am personally super excited about this guy.
I agree. All right, let's look at AFC North guards real quick. Obviously, in Pittsburgh, you got Seumalo and James Daniels. Let's see, Baltimore, I think looking at some depth chart here, Voorhees. Are they expecting Voorhees to be their left guard this year? It kind of sounds like it. Him and Ben Cleveland.
Yeah, Voorhees was the guy that I was really high on from USC that when he tear his pec on the bench press, I think, at the combine. And so I think he's going to be certainly in the mix, if not the leader, the front runner in that clubhouse right now. Cleveland, I know, I think, kind of turned it on late after a slow start to his career. I think I would take, would you take Daniels and Seumalo over, let's assume here, Voorhees and Cleveland as the starting guards?
I think I would. Yes.
I would as well. The Bengals, they have Cordell Volson at left guard, also signed Cody Ford and Alex Kappa. They have signed as well. Would you take Volson and Kappa or Daniels and Seumalo?
Seumalo and Daniels, I'd take there.
Yeah, I like Kappa a lot, but I think, Volson has struggled. I'm not sure if he's going to definitely start or if somebody else will get put in there, but I'll take Pittsburgh as well, which leaves us with Cleveland with their known guys there in Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller.
Yeah, I got to go with the Browns duo there.
Me as well. I know they've had some injuries, but at their best, that's a really impressive guard tandem. So I will rank Pittsburgh second in the AFC North in guard play.
All right, that's where I come in on this on the heels of that question there. Let's see. Great job. This from Ryan Kane. Great job as always on the podcast. Great for me to listen to wind down on stressful work days. He says, I've always agreed with Dave this whole time with Najee Harris. He says, I hated the draft pick in general in the first round, but I'm also coming to Najee's defense. He says, I haven't seen or heard anyone bring up how important he was the last 2 games of last season, especially that Ravens game when Jaylen Warren looked like he had the football drenched in butter in that terrible weather. He says, I really think the Steelers need them both, and I hope they find a way to make that happen. So that's Ryan chiming in on the Najee Harris situation there. Trying to see if I've got one more here. I think we've hit everything else here because this one's from Jay and Clarion that we hit. I know we hit the other day about the Dotson and McLaren all in Washington there. So I think we got about 3 emails knocked out there.
All right, good deal. And yeah, Najee was very important down the stretch, back-to-back 100-yard games. That's a great point about the Ravens game, that it was kind of the Najee Harris game. So I hear you on that. I think Pittsburgh enjoys having both backs. They complement each other well, and Pittsburgh has gone away from the workhorse model and is seeing the benefits of having that committee approach.
All right, I think we got about an hour and almost 20 minutes in here. So I think we got through everything we wanted to talk about today. Not bad topics. Spent a lot of time talking about 2025 cash and all that. Might have bored a few people, but should have been some interesting topics in here nonetheless. And we will see what surfaces between now and Tuesday when we'll be back at it again. Anything else to add before we get out of here?
Nope, that's all. I'll be back Tuesday. And yeah, that's all I got.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com. Find the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. Get yourself a username and password for $25 for one calendar year, and then log into the site and you can get the ad-free version of the site. So until Tuesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.